Hi everyone, this is Denise and welcome back to my channel. I just wanted to talk to you today about yeast. Now, yeast and specifically yeast overgrowth is a big issue with a lot of people, especially kids on the spectrum. So if you're a person who has like autoimmune issues or food sensitivities or allergies, or you're a parent of a child who has autism or ADHD, definitely I really want you to zero in on this video. But yeast, for a lot of people, they don't realize that yeast is one of those things that is naturally in our bodies, just like bacteria. Good and bad bacteria, along with yeast, they all kind of create this great, symbiotic relationship, and it's this perfect balance in our bodies. And the issues arise, like with many things, when that balance is disrupted. So oftentimes what you see is as a result of the overgrowth of yeast, a litany of GI issues or immune issues, because those things directly impact metabolism, to the brain. And as a result of those deficiencies, and then that then leads to issues with, vitamin absorption, and we have deficiencies in CoQ10 and ALA, and all of those things are then, depleted amongst others. But for our kids on the spectrum especially, those deficiencies directly affect like mitochondrial function as well as glutathione function. And those things are so important. That's why oftentimes with our autistic population, those areas are usually deficient. But let's just back up a little bit. So when we talk about yeast overgrowth, most of the common ones that you hear, or the term that you hear, is candida. But there's many others, but for the most part, candida usually is the one that is flagged. But yeast overgrowth can come from having a high carb or a high sugar diet. It can come from excess alcohol. It can come from, chronic stress. Or it can come from, the dysbiosis, the imbalance that you have in your gut already. If you're still eating wheat and dairy and all those things, you're doing yourself no favors. And you're creating this environment that's going to be more susceptible and conducive to yeast overgrowth. I know for our older population and a lot of women, birth control and certain medications oftentimes lead to yeast overgrowth. Antibiotics are one of those things that for some people it's necessary, but it wipes out the good and the bad bacteria, but it doesn't wipe out the yeast. So because, like I said, the yeast and the bacteria, they kind of have this balance with each other. But if you wipe out all the bacteria, the yeast are just kind of left behind to, do as they will. And oftentimes they proliferate like gremlins. And then you end up having, a systemic issue with yeast. And for most women, they see that, in yeast infections. And they think that somehow, the woman is nasty or something. People have issues with that. But oftentimes it's from what you're putting in your mouth. So anyway, a couple of things to keep track of. And I'm going to use this list specifically for, our autistic children. But you can see this as well in, older populations as well. So one of the first things I noticed with my son, and I didn't notice at the time that it was necessarily yeast, but it was certain behaviors that he was displaying. So he was, climbing on everything. And when I say climbing, he would climb up on the stairs, he'd climb up on the couch, he'd climb up on the table. He was just practically like, feral in a sense, where he was just constantly climbing everywhere. And I was like, what's going on with him? And or be hanging off of furniture, you name it. Inappropriate laughter. He would be in the middle of the night laughing hysterically. And when I say the middle of the night, like midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, lights are out, pitch black, and he is in his room. Mind you, he's still awake, but he would be hysterically laughing and so giddy, and nothing's funny. So another thing that's a sign of yeast overgrowth is when some of these kids are like really aggressive, really irritable, really aggressive. Toe walking is another one. I already mentioned sleep difficulties, constipation, belly aches, a bloated belly, increased stimming. I know my son, like he would run like from one end of the room to another, just pew, 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 pew. Inattention, he was kind of checked out sometimes. intense sugar cravings or intense carb cravings where all he wanted to do was just eat carbs. And I already have a video about that as well. So if you have a kid on the spectrum that all they do is eat carbs all the time, then more than likely they have a yeast problem. Headaches, congestion, yeasty smelling stool, those are going to be the behaviors that are most common that you're going to see. But there's a litany of other things that I haven't mentioned, but that's something for you to look into as well. And then the signs that you'll see, not just the behaviors, but the physical symptoms and signs that you would see for someone who has a yeast overgrowth is like their lips will be really dry and cracked, or you might see like a rash or peeling between their toes, on their feet. You might also see like in their skin, you know, a lot of kids suffer from eczema. Oftentimes it's because they have a yeast overgrowth. A rash on the tongue or inside the mouth. And then for some kids, especially like our babies and stuff, like if you look at, which will be easier to look and see, but if you look, there will be like a red ring around their anus. That's another physical sign of yeast overgrowth. Okay, so now that we figured out, okay, what yeast is and the signs that there's an overgrowth, well, how do we fix it? And with many things that I talk about on my channel, it's not about, you know, treating or suppressing the symptoms. It's about getting to the root cause of the problem. Otherwise, you'll treat yeast and then it'll come back, and then you treat it again, it'll come back, and you're just on this roller coaster or merry-go-round. And at the end of the day, we want to get to the root cause so we don't have to deal with this anymore. And yeast, you know, they're very, it's difficult to treat yeast because they change, you know, they have a way of protecting themselves. So a couple of things that have helped me and a couple of things that, you know, are available out there to you to help with yeast. First thing on the list, and this is what I tell most people for most everything, you have to change your diet. Because if you think about what yeast is, you know, it's fed, they feed off of sugar. And if you're eating a lot of sugar, the way to cut out the yeast is you got to cut off the food supply. So you really have to go on a really strict either low carb or no sugar diet. You really have to invest in that. Otherwise, you're just going to be back on that merry-go-round no matter what you do. But you want to definitely starve them out in a sense. So changing your diet, cutting out their food supply, that'll definitely, you know, get rid of the yeast. Another thing you can do, some people prescribe like medications. So nystatin is a popular one. Diflucan is a popular medication. But you can also do like a good probiotic. I know with my son, we started him on some probiotics. This is the one that we were using. I don't know if you can see it. This is one that we use. But then I also pair that probiotic with this. And this is very helpful because as much as this is yeast, it's a kind of like a yeast fighting yeast. So I don't know if that's the best description for it, but these two in conjunction together, or this with either, you know, another good probiotic, is going to be helpful. Some people use colostrum. Some people use grapefruit seed extract. That's another good one that's very potent that you can use. Olive leaf extract. Palo d'Arco, that's another herb that people use to treat yeast. Caprylic acid. I mean, there's a host of other things out there. But at the end of the day, if you recognize that you have a yeast overgrowth, you want to definitely start treating it. But the first thing I would do is changing the diet. Changing the diet is going to help you a ton. And then you add in those other supplementations. The next thing I want to talk about is when you treat yeast, what you can expect. And oftentimes when you're detoxing anything out of the body, especially toxins or overgrowth of bad bacteria or yeast, those things often leave behind their own toxins and destruction. So I kind of equate it to like when you watch like a war movie and you have the good guys against the bad guys, and it's just they go to war, and then after the dust has settled and everything's over with, you see all the dust and you see all the smoke and the soot and all the dead bodies and everybody laying around everywhere. That's kind of, you know, the way it happens in your body when you start cutting out, you know, sugary foods and you start taking supplementations and things like that. you have all this, destruction left behind. And when your body is going through that process, there's a name for it, and it's called Herxheimer reaction. But oftentimes people say that it's a die-off. And it's the die-off from all of that destruction that the yeast has left behind as you're getting rid of them or as you're killing them off. And sometimes it's hard for the body to process that. It's hard for the body to go through that. So I usually tell people, if you're going to start with like some sort of like yeast protocol or any sort of detox protocol where you're getting rid of bugs, bad bugs, or you're getting rid of toxins, you want to have something to kind of come in and mop up all the mess, clean it up. That way those toxins aren't reabsorbed into the body. And if you're killing up a lot of bugs, if you have a lot of yeast, if you have a lot of stuff going on with you, your body's going to probably be like, woof, this is a lot. And it's going to be difficult. And oftentimes people get certain symptoms and they're like, oh my God, something must be wrong because now I have a headache, or this is going on, or my skin is breaking out, or whatever it is. But it's your body trying to get rid of these toxins. And sometimes it's difficult for it to do so. So long story short, I tell a lot of people, try a binder or some sort of activated charcoal. This is the one that I use to kind of help, mop up some of that crap that's left behind. Oftentimes water, drinking lots and lots of water to kind of flush your body out. Vitamin C, magnesium in high doses. And that way it'll kind of stimulate your body to poop. Because oftentimes that's how you're getting rid of it. It's either going to come out through your poop or it's going to come out through your skin. So, drinking lots of water, taking vitamin C or magnesium, that's going to help your body eliminate that. And even sometimes, from all of the die-off that you're getting, you may even get, constipation. And then when in doubt, you may have to break out the enema. You may need to get the enema out there to get rid of some of that stuff that's left behind. So those are the things that I would definitely recommend as far as, how to handle the die-off when it does happen. Epsom salts baths are good, all those things. And then finally, outside of, let's say, the behaviors or the symptoms and the physical signs that I've talked to you about with yeast, for some people, you may want to take it a step further. And I would recommend doing testing, especially for our kids on the spectrum. Go ahead and get a test done. And when I talk about a test, I'm talking about a stool test. And there's many others, but I find that getting a stool test done is going to be more specific. It's going to outline, how much yeast you have and where it is. And it's going to allow you to target those areas in the gut. I know I used a functional medical doctor because the pediatricians, unfortunately, they're not equipped to ask certain questions or even be able to run these tests. So if you can find you a functional medical doctor or naturopath or some sort of holistic integrative doctor, that's going to be helpful because they'll know what tests to order. They'll know what labs to send it to. Geneva Diagnostics is a popular one. Great Plains Laboratory is another one. Doctors Data. There's several out there. And some of these tests you can even go online and do yourself. You could, mail it off or ask for them to mail you an invoice. Do the test yourself. But oftentimes when it's time for interpretation, you'll still need a physician to kind of assist you with that. But that's where I would start to get that done. So I hope this video, like all the others, are helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to comment and ask. And I'll see you again next time.